My mother-in-law convinced my husband to take a break from me. Now she's begging me to save their family business from bankruptcy. Let me back up and tell you how this beautiful disaster unfolded. I'm Aurora, and I've been married to my husband Blake for 5 years now. We met in our early 30s, you know, that sweet spot when you think you've got life figured out. Blake's one of those genuinely good guys, the kind who still opens doors and remembers your coffee order after all these years. He runs the family bakery, Sweetwood Delights, with his mother Dolores, right here in the heart of Millbrook, Tennessee. The bakery itself is actually charming, one of those picture-perfect spots that tourists love to Instagram. They're famous throughout the county for their custom wedding cakes and those incredible maple pecan Danish pastries that have people driving from 3 towns over. The smell of fresh bread and cinnamon rolls hits you the moment you walk through those vintage glass doors. Here's the ironic part that'll make you laugh. I'm a financial consultant who specializes in small business turnarounds. When Blake and I got serious, I naturally wanted to help his family succeed. So early in our marriage, I rolled up my sleeves and dove into their books. I streamlined their operations, cut unnecessary costs, and helped them launch an online ordering system that boosted their sales by 30% in the first quarter alone. You'd think Dolores would appreciate having a daughter-in-law who literally saved them thousands of dollars, right? Wrong. From day one, Dolores made it crystal clear that I wasn't what she had in mind for her precious son. I was too career-focused, apparently. Not domestic enough. She had this vision of Blake marrying some small-town girl who'd spend her days perfecting casserole recipes and volunteering at church bake sales. The woman nitpicked everything about me. My cooking wasn't home-style enough. I worked too many hours. I folded fitted sheets wrong, and yes, she actually criticized my sheet-folding technique during a family dinner. She'd make these passive-aggressive comments like, well, I suppose not everyone can make a proper cornbread, while serving store-bought mix at Sunday dinners. Blake, bless his heart, always defended me. He'd jump in with, Mom, Aurora's cornbread is fantastic, or she's building her career, just like Dad did with the bakery. But Dolores was persistent. She had this way of wearing people down with constant little digs, like water dripping on stone. I tried everything to win her over. I brought homemade apple butter to family gatherings. I offered to help with holiday baking. I even suggested we take a weekend trip together to that famous pastry school in Nashville, just the two of us, some mother-daughter-in-law bonding time. Nothing worked. If anything, my efforts seemed to annoy her more. She'd smile sweetly to my face, then I'd overhear her telling Blake things like, she's trying too hard, honey. It doesn't feel natural. The tension was getting to Blake, I could see it. He'd come home from the bakery looking exhausted, not from the physical work, but from being caught in the middle. Sometimes I'd catch him staring out the kitchen window with this defeated expression, like he was trying to solve an impossible puzzle. Little did I know, Dolores was working on her own solution, one that would temporarily remove me from the equation entirely. Last year, things took a sharp turn for the worse. Dolores started what I can only describe as a psychological warfare campaign, and Blake was her unwitting target. It began subtly. She'd call him during dinner, her voice dripping with concern. You sound so tired, sweetheart. Are you getting enough rest? Then she'd pause meaningfully and add, I worry about all the stress you're under. When Blake would mention any minor disagreement we'd had, and I'm talking about normal couple stuff, like whether to get premium cable or which restaurant to try for date night, Dolores would seize on it. Oh honey, conflict at home is the worst thing for a man's health. Your father, God rest his soul, always said a peaceful home is a successful home. She started showing up at the bakery earlier and staying later, claiming she wanted to help out more. But really, she was monopolizing Blake's time, filling his ears with her version of marital wisdom. Marriage shouldn't be this hard, she'd tell him while they were decorating a wedding cake together. When it's right, it flows naturally. Like butter in warm dough. I didn't know about most of these conversations at the time. Blake would come home looking thoughtful, sometimes distant, but when I'd ask what was wrong, he'd just say, long day at work. The real kicker was when Dolores started bringing up Blake's ex-girlfriend, Autumn, who'd moved back to town after her divorce. She stopped by for coffee cake yesterday, Dolores would mention casually. She's doing so well now. So peaceful and content. She asked about you. Blake would roll his eyes and change the subject, but I could see the seeds of doubt being planted. Dolores was a master gardener when it came to growing insecurity. The breaking point came during one of our rare arguments, and I mean rare. Blake and I hardly ever fought, which made Dolores' claims about our constant conflict even more ridiculous. We were discussing whether to take a vacation to Colorado or stay local for a long weekend. Hardly the stuff of divorce court, right? But the next day, Blake came home from work looking like someone had died. He sat down at our kitchen table, still wearing his flour-dusted apron, and said the words that would change everything. "Mom thinks we should take some time apart." I actually laughed at first. "Your mom thinks what now?" "She's worried about how stressed I've been. Says the business is struggling because of the tension at home, and maybe we need some space to breathe and figure things out." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. "Blake, we barely argue. And what tension? I literally helped save your family's business." But I could see in his eyes that Dolores had done her work well. He looked genuinely confused, like he wasn't sure what was real anymore. "She knows about relationships," he said weakly. "She and Dad were married for 35 years. Your mother has never liked me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This isn't about our marriage, Blake. This is about her wanting me gone." He shook his head, looking miserable but determined. "Mom knows best. She just wants what's good for both of us." Those 4 words, "Mom knows best," hit me like a slap across the face. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the conversation, looking for signs I'd missed, trying to understand how we'd gotten here. Blake lay beside me, tossing and turning, clearly as torn up as I was. The next morning, over coffee and untouched blueberry muffins, we had the conversation that would end our marriage. "I think Mom might be right," Blake said, not meeting my eyes. "Maybe we do need a trial separation. Just to refocus, get some clarity." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "A trial separation suggested by your mother, who's been trying to get rid of me since day one." "It's not like that, Aurora. She cares about both of us." "She cares about getting me out of your life," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Blake, can you honestly tell me she's ever said one positive thing about me? Ever?" He was quiet for a long moment, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. "I just think some time apart might help," he said finally. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "Fine. If that's what you want, that's what you'll get." I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to cry and plead and give Dolores the satisfaction of seeing me broken. Instead, I did something that shocked everyone, including myself. I called my lawyer. Within 3 days, I had divorce papers drawn up. Not separation papers, divorce papers. I walked into Sweetwood Delights during the lunch rush, when I knew both Blake and Dolores would be there, along with a handful of customers. "Aurora." Blake looked surprised and hopeful. "I didn't expect." I placed the papers on the counter between the cash register and a tray of fresh chocolate chip cookies. "You wanted a break," I said calmly. "Here's your permanent one." The color drained from his face as he picked up the documents. These are divorce papers. I'm not interested in trial separations or breaks or whatever your mother wants to call it. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." Dolores appeared from the back kitchen, flour on her hands and a triumphant gleam in her eyes that she tried to hide behind fake concern. "Oh, Aurora, surely there's no need for such drastic measures." "Actually, there is," I interrupted. "Blake, you have 2 weeks to respond. My lawyer will be in touch." I turned to leave, but Blake caught my arm. "Wait, please. Can't we talk about this?" I looked at him, really looked at him. This man I'd loved for 7 years, who'd shared my dreams and my bed and my life, who was now choosing his manipulative mother over our marriage. "You said your mom knows best," I said quietly. "So ask her how to handle this." And I walked out. The silence that followed was broken only by the gentle chime of the doorbells and the whispered conversations of customers who just witnessed the town's biggest drama unfold over a batch of snickerdoodles. Blake signed the papers 2 weeks later. When my lawyer called to confirm, all he said was, he wrote "Mom knows best" in the margin. That hurt more than I expected. After the divorce was finalized in September, I did something Dolores never expected. I thrived. No more walking on eggshells. No more Sunday dinners where every casserole felt like a judgment. No more watching Blake torn between the two women in his life. I was free, and freedom tasted better than any of Dolores' award-winning apple pies. I threw myself into work with renewed energy. Without the emotional drain of constant family drama, my focus sharpened like a laser. I landed 3 major clients in 2 months, businesses that had been bleeding money and needed someone who could perform financial surgery with precision. My reputation as the consultant who could save hopeless cases spread throughout Tennessee and into neighboring states. The promotion came in October, senior partner at Hartwell & Associates, the most prestigious financial consulting firm in Nashville. It came with a corner office, a salary that made my eyes water, and the kind of professional respect I'd always dreamed of. I bought a gorgeous condo in the trendy Gulch district, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Cumberland River. Modern kitchen, hardwood floors, and best of all, no family photos of disapproving in-laws cluttering up the mantelpiece. For the first time in years, I started dating again. Nothing serious, just rediscovering who I was when I wasn't constantly defending my worth to someone who'd already decided I wasn't good enough. Coffee dates, dinner at new restaurants, concerts at the Ryman Auditorium. I even went salsa dancing, something Blake had never wanted to try because Dolores thought dancing was undignified for a married man. My confidence came roaring back. I'd forgotten how good it felt to walk into a room and not worry about whether someone's mother would approve of my outfit or my laugh or the way I seasoned my chicken. Meanwhile, back in Millbrook, things weren't going quite so well at Sweetwood Delights. I heard bits and pieces through mutual friends. Blake looked miserable. The bakery was struggling. Dolores had made some questionable business decisions without consulting anyone who actually understood finance. Imagine that. But I pushed those thoughts away. Not my circus, not my monkeys, as they say. Then, one gray November morning, 8 months after I'd walked out of that bakery with my head held high, my assistant knocked on my office door. "Aurora? There's a woman here to see you. Says it's urgent. She's crying in the lobby." I looked up from the quarterly reports I was reviewing. Did she give a name? Dolores Whitmore. Says she's family. My blood ran cold. Through my office's glass wall, I could see her sitting in our pristine waiting area, looking completely out of place among the sleek furniture and abstract art. She was clutching a tissue, her usually perfect silver hair disheveled, her carefully applied makeup smeared. For a moment, I considered telling my assistant to send her away. I could claim I was in meetings all day, too busy for unscheduled visits from people who'd made it clear I wasn't family anymore. But curiosity won out. "Send her in," I said, straightening my blazer and mentally preparing myself for whatever had brought the woman who destroyed my marriage to my office door. This was going to be interesting. Dolores walked into my office like a woman attending her own funeral. Gone was the confident matriarch who'd ruled Sunday dinners and family decisions with an iron fist disguised as Southern charm. This version of my former mother-in-law looked smaller somehow, defeated. She sat down across from my desk without being invited, her hands twisted around that soggy tissue like it was a lifeline. "Aurora," she began, her voice cracking. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see." I leaned back in my leather chair, keeping my expression neutral. "You're right about that. What do you want, Dolores?" The tears started flowing again. Real tears, not the crocodile variety she'd perfected for getting Blake to do what she wanted. "The bakery's in trouble. Bad trouble. We're going to lose everything." I waited. She'd driven 2 hours to Nashville to tell me something I could have guessed from the gossip mill. There had to be more. "We need your help," she said, the words coming out like she was pulling them from somewhere deep and painful. "You're the only one who can save us." The irony was so thick you could have served it with whipped cream. The woman who'd called me useless, who'd convinced her son I was a burden to their family, was now sitting in my office begging for my expertise. "Blake's a mess without you," she continued, apparently deciding that brutal honesty was her best strategy. I thought he'd be happier without all the stress. But he's not eating, barely sleeping. The business decisions he's making, they're terrible, Aurora. Everything's falling apart." She pulled out a folder stuffed with papers, financial statements, bank notices, supplier invoices. Even from across the desk, I could see the red ink bleeding through the pages. "I made mistakes," she said, pushing the folder toward me. "Bad investments, expanding too fast without proper research. I thought I knew better than professional advice." She couldn't quite bring herself to say your advice, but we both knew what she meant. I opened the folder and started scanning the numbers. It was worse than I'd expected. They were weeks away from bankruptcy, maybe days. Suppliers demanding payment, lease agreements in default, equipment loans in arrears. The kind of financial disaster that usually meant closing doors forever. How do you even know all this is happening? I asked, genuinely curious. Dolores had the grace to look embarrassed. Blake doesn't know I'm here. He's been calling you, leaving voicemails, but I haven't been returning them. I'd seen his name pop up on my phone dozens of times over the past few weeks. Each call deleted without listening to the message. Please, Dolores said, and the word came out like a prayer. I know I don't deserve to ask. I know what I did to your marriage, to you. But the bakery, it's my life's work. It's all we have left. She leaned forward, desperation making her bold. I'll pay you whatever you charge. I'll give you equity in the business. I'll write you a public apology. Whatever you want. I almost laughed. Almost. Where was this family helps family attitude when you were destroying mine? The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Finally, I closed the folder and looked at her directly. I'll think about it. I didn't make Dolores wait long, but I made her sweat plenty. 2 days later, I called her back with my terms. Not a request, not a negotiation, an ultimatum. I want a written apology acknowledging that you manipulated Blake into ending our marriage, I said, cutting straight to the point. I want Blake to publicly admit what happened to everyone in our social circle. And I want my full consulting rate plus 20% equity in the bakery. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted so long I thought she'd hung up. 20%? She finally squeaked. That's what it costs to save a business from bankruptcy when you've insulted the person you're asking for help. Take it or leave it. Desperation won, just like I knew it would. I drove back to Millbrook for the first time since the divorce, pulling into the parking lot of Sweetwood Delights like a conquering hero returning to reclaim her kingdom. The bakery looked tired, paint peeling around the windows, the cheerful sign faded and weather-beaten. Inside, it was worse. Half-empty display cases, a few scattered customers looking disappointed at the limited selection. The warm, inviting atmosphere I remembered had been replaced by the stale air of a dying business. Dolores was waiting for me at one of the small tables, the written apology spread out in front of her like a confession at trial. I read it carefully, making sure every manipulation and lie was acknowledged in her careful script. That's when Blake walked in. He looked terrible. 20 pounds thinner, dark circles under his eyes, moving like a man carrying the weight of his mistakes on his shoulders. When he saw me sitting there with his mother, he stopped dead in his tracks. Aurora. His voice was barely above a whisper. I stayed calm, professional. Hello, Blake. What are you doing here? Your mother hired me to save the family business. I gestured to the papers between Dolores and me. We were just going over the terms. Blake looked back and forth between us, confusion and hope warring on his face. Does this mean, are you coming back? I'm here as a consultant. Nothing more. He sank into the chair across from me, and I watched this man who'd once been my everything crumble right there in the bakery his family had run for 3 generations. I was an idiot, he said, tears streaming down his face. Mom controlled everything, and I let her. I chose her manipulation over our marriage, and I've regretted it every single day since. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, no lingering love. Just a professional detachment that surprised even me. You made your choice, I said simply. Now you have to live with it. Over the next few weeks, I worked my magic on their books. But I also had some fun with it. During every meeting, I made sure to point out each of Dolores' financial blunders with clinical precision. The overordering of expensive French pastry ingredients that had spoiled because she'd miscalculated demand. The disastrous expansion into catering without market research. The equipment purchases that had drained their cash reserves. Word spread fast in a town like Millbrook. Soon everyone was talking about how the woman who'd wrecked her son's marriage had also nearly destroyed the family business. Sometimes revenge is a dish best served with a side of public humiliation. The ultimate twist in this whole saga came during my final audit of their books, and it had me laughing so hard I nearly fell out of my chair. Hidden in the petty cash records, buried among legitimate business expenses, I found months of irregular withdrawals. Small amounts, 20 here, 50 there, but they added up to several $1,000s over the past year. The timing coincided perfectly with Dolores' campaign to destroy my marriage. Spa visits, shopping trips to Nashville, fancy dinners at expensive restaurants. All while she was crying poverty and blaming the business struggles on my negative influence on Blake. I printed out every receipt, highlighted every questionable expense, and called a meeting with both of them. We need to discuss some irregularities in the accounting, I said, spreading the evidence across the bakery's back office table like a prosecutor presenting a murder weapon. Dolores took one look at the papers and turned 3 shades paler than her signature vanilla buttercream frosting. Blake picked up a receipt from an upscale day spa in Chattanooga. "Mom, what is this?" "This is from the business account." I was stressed, Dolores stammered. The business was struggling, and I needed. "You needed retail therapy while you were telling everyone the bakery was failing because of my marriage?" I asked sweetly. Fascinating business strategy. Blake's face went from confusion to understanding to fury in about 5 seconds. "You were stealing from our own business? While blaming Aurora for our problems?" "It wasn't stealing," Dolores protested. "I founded this bakery. I deserve." "You deserve nothing," Blake interrupted, his voice harder than I'd ever heard it. "Your meddling cost me my marriage, and now I find out you were literally stealing money while convincing me my wife was the problem?" The confrontation that followed was epic. Blake finally, stood up to his mother with the backbone I'd always known he had buried somewhere deep inside. He kicked her out of the business entirely, banned her from the bakery, and told her she could move in with her sister in Memphis if she needed somewhere to live. Dolores left town the next week, her tail between her legs and her empire in ruins. The bakery, running under Blake's sole management with my financial strategies, started turning a profit within 6 weeks. He begged me to give our marriage another chance, showing up at my Nashville office with a bouquet of sunflowers and a speech about how sorry he was. "I know I don't deserve it," he said. "But I love you, and I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you if you'll let me." I listened politely, then told him about Cameron, the investment banker I'd been seeing for 3 months. Stable, successful, and refreshingly free of mother issues. "I hope you find happiness, Blake," I said, meaning it. "But it won't be with me." I sold my equity stake in the bakery for a tidy profit, enough to fund a month-long solo trip to Italy, where I ate the most incredible pastries and didn't think about small-town drama once. Dolores still sends me texts sometimes, begging for family time. But I've blocked her number. After all, she wanted a break from me. She got a permanent one.